Good day, folks. Here we are again for another episode of NB Bassin, part 2 of this week's show. My name is Donald Patterson, and I am your host, coming to you from another beautiful New Brunswick morning. A day that I'd much rather be out on the water than I would be at work, but we have to pay to play, so here I am. Thanks must go out to, as always, Fish Bum Outfitters, Carrot Sticks Rods, Southern Yankee Baits, War Dog Lures, Northern Michigan Outfitters, Hooked on Canadian Angling, and most importantly, my wife and my son. Thanks to everybody involved in helping me do what I do. Getting back to what we discussed in part 1, sticking to your plan on tournament day, sticking to your plan in general. Excuse me. There is, as I was saying, you have to grit it out. You have to grind things out. And there are days you're going to take your lumps. And this is where I think it's up to guys who have been around a little longer, or guys who, I haven't been around the tournament scene that long, but I've had the opportunity to be involved with a number of people who are, and I've picked up a lot from them. But I think it's the responsibility of more experienced anglers. If we want our sport to grow, we have to be there to talk to guys who are newer at this when they take their lumps. Guys go out, especially on a home lake or a home stretch of river or whatever the case may be, where guys are feeling, even though they're less experienced, they're feeling very confident, and that's great. I love seeing guys hit the water with confidence in the mornings, no matter how high or low their experience level is. But when they come back in that afternoon, and their chin's on their chest and they're, a little bit crestfallen because they haven't had the day they thought they were going to have. It's up to the more experienced guys to give them that little push, that little reinforcement to say, hey, look, we've all been there. We've all been out the week before and caught huge numbers, and then all of a sudden when the actual tournament day rolls around, we can't catch a cold. But that doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. You may be doing, how do I put this? You're not doing anything wrong, but you may not feel like you're doing anything right. Some days the bites aren't there. There are so many factors that come into play. And I mean, we've all experienced it. I literally, last year in an event down in Maine, myself and the guy I was fishing with, Jeff Rathburn, we were throwing identical lures. Literally identical lures. And he was getting hammered. Just every cast, it seemed like. It probably wasn't every cast, but when you're not getting hit at all, it sure feels like the other guy's getting hit every cast. Every stinking cast, he was getting hooked up. I wasn't getting a bump. Nothing. And he turned around and looked at me, looked at the rod I was using, looked at the line that was on it, and he said, grab that rod out of the box. He said, tie that lure on. And it was as simple as the line I had on was too high visibility for the water conditions we had that day. The lake we were on was clear water. And I had on a higher visibility line, which in our tannin stained water on most of the river system here in New Brunswick is not an issue. But down there on that lake, it was. I switched rods, tied that bait onto a different rod with a lower visibility line, and we were off to the races. So it's not that you are necessarily, if you're not getting bit, it's not that you are throwing the wrong bait or in the wrong spot. Sometimes it's just tiny little differences. So when guys come in after having a bad day, especially newer guys, somebody's got to, remind them, like, hey, you've caught them before, you'll catch them again. You know, if we truly want this sport to grow, and as I've used the phrase before, grow the sport, not your ego. It's up to us to make sure these guys come back to the next event. Because nobody wants to feel like they're just showing up in a tournament just to give their money away. Everybody wants to feel like, you know, I mean, we all know going in as newer anglers, or well, I hope we all know going in as newer anglers, there's a learning curve. There is a certain amount of time where you're at a disadvantage. But as long as you are willing to stick with it, take advice when it's given to you, and tough it out. And luckily, most guys are. There is the occasional one that for whatever reason thinks he's going to set the tournament world on fire in their local region. You know, thinks he's going to be the next Kevin Van Dam, whatever the case may be. And don't get me wrong, the next Kevin Van Dam is out there somewhere. And maybe someone listening to this show is that person, or maybe someone listening to this show knows that person, and that's great. But 99.9% of us do this as weekend warriors, and if we're lucky, we get a shot at a bigger event somewhere in our career. You know, we get a crack at big money events. I could list a few, you know, FLW Canada for us here, some of your BASS Opens in the US. You know, there's some bigger money events around that the weekend warriors have a crack at once in a while. But for the most part, we're not going to make a living at this. We're just going to go out, meet some good people, have a lot of fun. If we're lucky, we're going to cash a check every now and then, you know, enough to cover our expenses for a week or two. You know, but that's it. It's not like this is, you know, our paycheck's on the line if we give somebody else a little bit of encouragement. We're not taking food off our family's table by helping somebody else out. So, because if you're that reliant on winning a fishing tournament, a local fishing tournament, to pay your bills, you probably can't afford to fish that tournament in the first place. So, I just, and that is one thing that I have seen for the most part, tournament anglers here in New Brunswick, you know, and not necessarily just the guys that are fishing the series I'm on. There's other guys that fish other series, fish down in Maine. They're still willing to help, to talk. You know, if I'm fishing a body of water that I have no experience on or little experience on, there's a few guys that I know well enough, I can pick up the phone and say, hey, any advice? And they'll give me some, you know, they'll let me pick their brain for a little bit. And that's what this is all about. It's nurturing. I hate using the term nurturing. It sounds like we're dealing with children, but encouraging new anglers, supporting them, getting them up to speed so they're comfortable. Because once they're comfortable, then they're going to be able to help the next bunch to come along. I was contacted yesterday by a 15-year-old high school student who's interested in tournament angling, wanting to know if he could fish our series or where he should be looking to get his feet wet in tournament angling. That made my day. The fact that someone of that age, you know, 15 years old is relatively young. I'm assuming, he didn't say, but I'm assuming he doesn't have anybody in his family who tournament fishes, or he'd probably already have an avenue to get a foot in the door and give it a try. But someone who has, you know, decided that's something he wants to try at 15 years old. I wish I had had the opportunity when I was younger. I mean, I didn't get into fishing until I was 30. So, someone who's 15 that wants to get into it, there's a young man that's going to spend his life fishing and hunting or doing stuff outdoors instead of sitting in the house playing video games, eating Cheetos, or out on the street causing mischief, getting arrested. You know, that's what our society needs more of. So that's why we need to continue to encourage each other and promote each other. And just keep the ball rolling. Make the sport grow. When there's an opportunity, excuse me, when there's an opportunity to grow our sport in one way, shape, or form, doesn't matter how, but when there's an opportunity to grow our sport in our local regions, and somebody, for whatever reason, whether it be a self-serving reason or just not wanting to take the time to actually get to learn more about the opportunity, but when someone blocks these opportunities, someone interferes with opportunities for the sport to grow, they're not just hurting themselves, they're hurting all of us. And that's why, if you have the desire to see something grow in your area, speak up. Speak up, get out there, push for it, work for it, volunteer, put the effort into it. Don't expect somebody else to do it all for you. Because if we don't work for it ourselves, nobody else is going to do it for us. So just keep that in mind when you hear tell, well, this opportunity's coming, but they're having a hard time getting it put together because, you know, there's not enough manpower, or, you know, there's 5 votes against 4 so far, whatever the case may be. Speak up. If it's something you are passionate about, take the bull by the horns and help get it done. I know I strayed quite a bit there from sticking to your game plan and toughing it out on tournament day, but that's part of what I enjoy about doing the show. I can basically just go whatever direction my thoughts take me, whatever direction my own ramblings take me, and at the end of the day, it is just me ranting and rambling. So I guess I have that luxury, and the fact that I don't try to script anything just gives me the opportunity to vent when need be. So sometimes you folks bear the brunt of my ramblings, and I apologize in advance, but I appreciate everybody who takes the time to listen. But just a quick call back, turn around back to what I was discussing. When you're out there on the water on tournament day and everything seems to be falling apart, sit down, have a sandwich, have a bottle of water, have a cigarette, whatever you do to focus yourself, and just remember, you've caught them before, you'll catch them again. Jason and I have had some terrible days on the water, come in completely empty-handed. I'm sorry, it's a hard pill to swallow. Or to walk across in front of those scales with one fish in the bag, when the guy in front of you's got 14 pounds, and the guy behind you's got 13 and a half, and you've got 1.4. But hey, that's what you caught that day, bring it to the scales. Especially if you're in a series that involves points, that's what you caught, bring it to the scales. Because sometimes that points day from that 1.4 pounds is going to be a difference maker. You may not think so at the time, but bring it to the scales. So, anyways, ladies and gentlemen, just that quick 15 minutes is gone again. Thank you very much for listening. This has been NB Bass, and thank you to Fish Bum Outfitters, War Dog Lures, Southern Yankee Baits, Carrot Sticks Rods, Northern Michigan Outfitters, and Hooked on Canadian Angling. Keep those lines tight, folks. Have a good day.